What happens when an 8-year-old girl is told she doesn't belong because of the color of her skin? This is the heartbreaking yet inspiring journey of Layla, a child who turned pain into power, silence into voice, and shadows into light. The morning light slipped over the low rooftops of Southside Chicago, turning the dew on the chain-link fences into pearls. Layla, small, bright-eyed, 8 years old, stood on a kitchen chair tying the last knot of her shoelace. Her brand new uniform skirt swished when she hopped down. On the fridge, a crayon drawing of a stethoscope and a big red heart read, "Future Doctor." "Big day," her mother said, pinning Layla's curls gently. The mother's janitor badge still hung around her neck from the night shift at the hospital. Her father, broad-shouldered, hands calloused from construction, slid a lunchbox across the table. "Peanut butter and jelly," he grinned, "and an apple to make doctors jealous." Layla pressed her palms to the cool window glass and watched the street wake up. Buses sighing, a dog tugging its leash, the morning cloud lifting. She took a breath so deep it almost hurt, then hugged her parents as if they might vanish. "I'll make you proud," she whispered. School smelled like waxed floors and sharpened pencils. Hallways shimmered with bulletin boards, stars for good readers, gold stickers for math. Layla found room 2C where a chalky welcome tried its best to mean it. She sat at a desk near the window and folded her hands, heart pattering like a sparrow. Two girls glanced over, then at each other. A boy wrinkled his nose and dragged his chair away. A whisper started somewhere and spread, words that poked like thorns without being said out loud. When the teacher asked a question about the story on the board, Layla raised her hand, small, hopeful. The teacher's eyes moved past her like she was a smudge on the glass. At recess, a ball bounced to her feet. "Can I play?" she asked. A boy with a slick cowlick shrugged, then nudged the ball behind his back. "We already have teams." There was a space on the blacktop big enough for anyone. But that was the thing. Space could be generous or stingy, depending on who held it. At lunch, Layla unfolded her napkin carefully, set the apple on it like a treasure, and tried to smile at the table of girls beside her. Their laughter curled around her and fell away like a wave that never reached the shore. She chewed and pretended peanut butter didn't glue sadness to the roof of her mouth. That evening, her father's knuckles were raw from hauling plasterboard. Her mother's shoulders ached, but she stitched Layla's name into a backpack strap anyway. Layla held herself together till bedtime. Then the dam cracked. "Will anyone love me with this skin?" she asked the dark room, and the question floated up like a paper lantern, fragile and glowing. Her mother gathered her close. "Your skin is your crown, never your curse," she said, voice steady as heartbeat. "And crowns aren't made to bend." Layla fell asleep with the echo of that promise. But promises and mornings have a way of being tested. Over the next weeks, the small slights multiplied. A seat saved that never was. Group projects where her name was missing. A teacher's raised eyebrow when she knew the answer. The world around her adjusted, and she learned to fold herself smaller to fit. One Friday, her father came home early, jaw tight. They said the promotion went to someone with better fit. He blew the word like dust. Same years, less skill. Layla didn't know all the words for what had happened. She just saw how his shoulders drooped, how the house felt a degree colder. Outside on the stoop, the sky purpled. She imagined that somewhere above the clouds, it was the same blue for everyone. Winter crept in with gray afternoons and breath that showed. On the bus, kids pressed together and left a measurable gap around Layla, like she carried a cold only they could see. When the bus lurched, she reached for the pole and caught a look from a boy that said, "Don't touch what I touch." In class, she drew smaller and smaller in her chair. When the science fair was announced, she bounced in her seat. She loved questions that could be answered by light bulbs and wires. "I want to build a model of the heart," she told her teacher, cheeks glowing. "I want to show how it pumps." "We'll see," the teacher said, already turning to another hand. Maybe something simpler. At recess, the tetherball spun and tangled. A pair of boys laughed and passed whispers that ran like mice. "You can't catch us," one said, but he wasn't playing tag. Layla started eating lunch in the library. She wrote in a blue-covered notebook with a pink elastic band. The first lines came out wobbly, then steadied. "They say my skin is a shadow. Sometimes it feels like night falls on me first. But in the night, the stars are mine." She wrote on the bus with gloves on, in bed with a flashlight, in the laundromat's warm, humming air. Words stitched a net beneath the drop. One evening, she sat on the stairs outside their building, watching snow come down like sifted sugar. A voice from the next stoop said, "Cold's easier if you talk to it." An elderly woman in a knitted hat and a long sage green coat smiled at her, a smile that understood. "Name's Beulah," she said. "Folks call me Auntie even when they ain't kin." Layla nodded, chin tucked into her scarf. "Child," Beulah Auntie said, "the world will try to dim your light. The trick is to remember where your switch is." Layla didn't answer, but she came back the next evening and the next. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they watched the neighborhood pass, a couple arguing in kind whispers, a delivery man leaving footprints in the snow, a girl braiding another's hair too tight. At home, money stretched thin enough to see through. Her father scanned job boards with the intensity of a man carrying his house on his back. Her mother took extra shifts, cleaned extra rooms. At night, Layla heard the sighs of the building, pipes, radiators worry. On a Tuesday heavy with gray, Ms. Howard, a substitute in 2C, her corkscrew curls tucked into a head wrap, asked the class to write a poem about home. Layla's heart pricked. She poured herself onto the page. Her block, the taste of her mother's Sunday greens, the sound of her father's laugh when it was free, the weight of a bus seat that stayed empty. When Ms. Howard asked for volunteers, Layla's hand lifted without permission. She read. The room went quiet in a way that didn't hurt. "Thank you," Ms. Howard said, eyes bright. "You have a voice." It was the first time an adult at school used that word like a gift, not a warning. But the next day, the regular teacher returned, and the air went back to normal, which was to say, thin. On the playground that week, a group of older kids snatched Layla's blue notebook. "What's this?" one smirked, flipping pages. Lines that were meant to hold her now hung in someone else's hands. "Baby writes about her feelings." "Give it back," Layla said, voice small but standing. They tore a page in half, then another. The pink elastic snapped and fell like a broken bracelet. Beulah found her on the stoop that night with red eyes and ink on her sleeves. "They ripped my words," Layla choked. "Words don't live on paper," Beulah said softly. "They live here." She tapped the center of Layla's chest. "Paper is just a way to let them breathe where others can see." Layla looked down at her empty hands. Somehow, she still felt something heavy and alive there. Spring crept back, shy as a first smile. In the thaw, small things dare to show, grass tips, purple crocuses by the school fence, Layla's chin a little higher. Miguel appeared at her side one day in the lunch line. His hair was too long for school rules, his shoelace trailing, his grip on his tray careful. "Is anyone sitting over there?" he asked, pointing to the table where no one ever sat. "No," Layla said. "Then, yes, you." They ate in the quiet that exists between people who understand the shape of loneliness. Miguel showed her a doodle of a rocket on his napkin. "I draw when I can't say," he said. Layla smiled. "I write when I can't draw." At home, her father's job search finally coughed up hope. A smaller firm on the west side needed a man who knew the bones of buildings. The interview went well, the second went better. When he came back with the paper to sign, he lifted Layla and spun her once, just once, laughter unbound. At school, Ms. Howard returned for a residency. She started a Tell Your Story Day on Fridays. Some kids rolled their eyes, but others brought pieces of themselves wrapped in construction paper and glue. Layla wrote a new poem, born from the ashes of the old notebook. They said my skin was a shadow, so I learned the language of stars. Shadows don't swallow light. They prove it's there. "Would you read at the spring assembly?" Ms. Howard asked. The question held both faith and a door. Layla's stomach fluttered, but she nodded. At night, she practiced in the mirror, in whispers at first, then louder, with her mother timing breaths, her father clapping on off beats. Word of her poem made its way through hallways, snickers from some, curious glances from others. The boy with the cowlick muttered, "Guess we're all poets now." But something in his voice sounded less certain. The day of the assembly, the auditorium smelled like polish and gym socks. The principal introduced awards for attendance and a choir number. Then Ms. Howard stepped up and said, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth about your life." Layla's shoes squeaked on the stage floor. The microphone was taller than she was. She didn't look at the crowd, not yet. She found the back wall, the ceiling lights, the curtains heavy red. Then she looked up, found her mother's face, her father's, glowing, trembling. "My name is Layla," she began, voice small but clear. "This is my story." She read. At first, her voice shook like a ladder leaned too far, then it steadied. The words remembered the path from her chest to her tongue. She spoke of bus seats and open spaces that closed, of lunches eaten in fog, of a blue notebook turned to snow. She spoke of a crown that didn't bend. She spoke the word love, and it didn't crack. Silence fell with weight, and when it broke into applause that rolled forward like a tide. Ms. Howard's eyes shone. The principal clapped with gratitude and a hint of surprise. Even the boy with the cowlick didn't quite meet her eyes as he clapped. A girl in the second row, Jenna, bit her lip like a thought had finally found her. Afterward in the corridor, Jenna approached, hands twisted in her sweater hem. She began, and the word was hard. "I didn't know," she said at last. "I didn't want to know. I'm sorry." Layla nodded. She didn't forgive everything, not yet, maybe not ever, but she saw where a door could open. Change, it turned out, did not arrive like a parade. It arrived like small weather. A cloud thinning, a draft warming, a window raised an inch. The PTA planned a listening night. The principal asked Ms. Howard to help form a diversity council. The librarian moved a display to the front called Voices That Lift. In the neighborhood, Beulah waved Layla over and handed her a small notebook with a red ribbon. "A seed needs soil," she said. "Try again." The new job steadied Layla's father. He came home with sawdust on his boots and stories about roofs that could finally stop leaking. Her mother, with her schedule less frantic, signed up for a GED prep class at the adult center. On Sundays after church, the three of them sat at the table doing homework, pencils tapping, laughter sneaking out. Layla and Miguel started meeting after school under the mural of the school mascot, a falcon whose paint had faded. "We should make a different kind of mural," Miguel said. "One that looks like us." They drafted a design on scrap paper, a circle of children, different shades, hands interlaced, with words threaded through the bodies like roots. Dignity, love, courage, truth. Ms. Howard loved it. The principal squinted, then nodded. "If you can get volunteers and permission slips, you can paint it on the back wall." On a Saturday bright enough to rinse winter from the bricks, they painted. Kids who'd never spoken to Layla handed her brushes. Jenna filled in the O of love carefully. Miguel added stars in the corners. Beulah, in her sage coat, watched from a folding. Good news has a way of drawing out the shadows. One morning, Layla arrived to find a smear of black spray paint across the mural. A jagged X slashed through dignity. Gasps trembled along the fence line. Someone laughed, the mean small kind. Layla's breath quickened. Panic, then a strange calm. She turned to the cluster of children and teachers. "We can repaint," she said, and the steadiness in her voice surprised her. They scrubbed. Paint thinner stung their noses. The old color bled out like a bruise and then was gone. Jenna rolled fresh primer with a set jaw. Miguel repainted the stars, this time brighter. Layla climbed the ladder and restored dignity, letter by letter. When she finished, the word looked like it had survived something. Maybe that was better. News of the vandalism and the restoration rippled through the block. A local reporter stopped by with a microphone that made Layla's mouth go cotton dry. "Why redo it?" the reporter asked. "Why not give up?" Layla glanced at Beulah, who nodded once. "Because it's ours," Layla said, finding the camera with steady eyes. "And because some things are worth repainting." The clip aired that night between weather and sports. For a day, the world felt a size larger and surprisingly kind. At school, a flyer went up. City Youth Poetry Slam. Submissions open. Ms. Howard pressed it into Layla's hand. "Your words belong in rooms you haven't met yet." Layla wrote late, long after dishes were done and the building tipsy with sleep. She wrote about paint that couldn't cover a heart, about hands learning not to fear other hands, about a crown, a switch, a bus seat, a notebook like a second throat. She wrote for the child she had been on day one. She wrote for the child who would come after. She wrote for the adults who'd forgotten how to hear. On the night of the slam, the auditorium downtown was bigger than her whole school. The air throbbed with the nerves and bass. Teenagers in denim and Sunday dresses tapped their phones, mouthed lines to themselves, prayed quietly. Miguel squeezed her hand. "Launch the rocket," he whispered. When her turn came, Layla walked out with a paper that shook just enough to tell the truth. She didn't look at the 1,000 faces. She looked at the beam of light slanting through the dust above the stage, at the way it caught the edges of her paper like a halo. "My name is Layla," she said, and the room leaned in. She told the story without naming names. She spoke in a language both simple and deep enough for anyone's well. She told them about the word welcome that didn't include her, about silence that grew teeth, about the first time somebody said she had a voice. She did not cry. Her words did that for her, somewhere in the 4th row, the 6th, the balcony. When she finished, the quiet was rich and whole, like soil after rain. Then the sound came, lifting her a little off the floor. She didn't win a trophy. She won something else. Letters from strangers, a teacher's email asking for a copy of her poem, a boy in a red hoodie who stopped her in the lobby and said, "Me too," and then walked away before he cried. Days flowed. The Colors of Love Club met Wednesdays to plan classroom visits for younger grades. They practiced how to listen without arguing, how to say "that hurt" without starting a war. They made posters that said, "See me and we all belong." Some adults rolled their eyes and said, "Kids these days." But other adults slid cookies across tables, set out chairs, stayed to listen. Layla's father built a porch for a woman who'd lost her husband. He came home dusty and proud. Her mother passed a practice test and taped a score to the fridge right next to "Future Doctor." Layla started to see the inside of her house as a little nation of victories. Then Beulah didn't come to the stoop for 3 days. On the 4th, Layla learned she was in the hospital, pneumonia. The ward smelled like lemon cleaner and something lonely. Beulah lay small in a big bed, her sage coat folded over the chair. "You brought your light," Beulah rasped when she saw Layla. "I can feel it on my face." Layla read her new poem, the one she hadn't shown anyone, Crown Lessons. She read about women who taught girls to keep their chins up, about hands that wrinkled like maps to places you hadn't seen yet, about a porch that felt like a church. When she finished, Beulah's eyes shone water clear. "You see," Beulah whispered, "the switch was always yours." On a bright June afternoon, the school hosted a community day under the mural. There were folding tables with cupcakes and lemonade, a bouncy house with squeals leaking out, a sign-up sheet for next year's Tell Your Story. The mural shimmered, a summer haze making the colors hum. The principal stepped up with a microphone. "We have a lot to learn still," he said. "But we've learned a little thanks to some brave young people." Ms. Howard called Layla forward. Her parents stood at the back, arms around each other, faces wet and proud. Miguel whooped. Jenna clapped hard. Layla looked up at the word dignity, at the circle of hands. For a second, noise dropped away, and she could hear the sound of paint drying months ago, the whisper of brushes making something out of nothing. She took the microphone. "They told me I was less because of my skin," she said, voice strong, "but now I know my skin carries history, strength, and beauty. It is not a shadow. It is my light, and no one can take that away." The cheer that rose then was not polite. It was a sound like doors unlocking up and down a street, like windows opened at the first warm night, like a city making room. Afterward, kids who used to pass her by tugged her sleeve. "Will you play?" they asked. She looked at the blacktop, the same old blacktop, but different. "Yeah," she said, grinning. "Let's make teams." They ran. The ball bounced. Laughter did the one holy thing laughter can do. It folded time. So for a while, day one and this day weren't far apart. Her mother watched, hands clasped under her chin. Her father shouted, "Go, doctor," and the nicknames stuck to the air like confetti. That night, Layla sat at the kitchen table with her new red ribbon notebook. She wrote the last lines of Shadows of Hearts. Not the story you're reading, but the one she lived in too. "They said I was a shadow. I learned to read the dark. Turns out even shadows are proof of light. Turns out the crown was always there. I just had to lift my head." She closed the notebook and put it beside the drawing on the fridge. Outside, the city murmured. Sirens, buses, music from a party 6 doors down. a baby crying and then soothed. The mural slept on the school wall, colors holding their breath till morning. Layla turned off the kitchen light and caught her reflection in the window. Small, crown invisible, light undeniable. Behind her, down the hall, her parents talked softly about bills and birthdays and summer shoes. In front of her, across the glass, the neighborhood blinked and breathed, 1,000 lives lit and unlit. She touched the window with her fingertips. Warmth met cold through a thin sheet of something clear. She didn't pull away. Tomorrow, she whispered to the night, we paint again if we have to. And somewhere on another block, in another house, a child who hadn't yet found her voice turned over in bed and dreamed of a wall with the word belong painted so big you could see it from the bus.